Today we're talking with Barbara Golden, who was the state law librarian in Minnesota from 2002 until her retirement in 2009. Barbara joined the library in 1983 and held several positions there prior to becoming the state law librarian. Barbara, let's begin with a little personal history. Tell us a little bit about your life, both when you were young and today.
Well, I was born and raised here in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I had a very idyllic childhood and parents who loved each other and loved us, and we weren't poor, but we weren't rich. We were middle class, and one of the things that they gave me was the sense of being honest, hardworking, and humorous. They also instilled the golden rule in me, so I appreciate the values that they gave me. Also, my dad liked to travel, and what he liked to do was to drive everywhere. And so we would take long trips around the country, around the 48 contiguous states, and go on camping in the great state national parks that we have and the state parks, and see the capitals of all the states. And so we eventually did visit the 48, and then we took the Alcan Highway up to Alaska. But I had to wait until after I traveled with them and travel on my own to see Juneau and Honolulu. But I'm glad to say I've seen all the state capitals.
I don't think you can drive to Honolulu, at least not from
And you can't
over
drive,
here.
and you can't drive to Juneau either. You have to take a ship.
Yeah.
So I took a nice cruise and finally got to Juneau. It's not anything to shout about, but it was my last state capital.
Mm-hmm.
And so that sense of wanting to travel has continued, and now that I'm retired, I can do more international travel, but I've been able to get to over 60 countries so far, and I hope I can continue to do that for the rest of my years. Otherwise, I've been indulging myself since retirement with lots of reading. I'm on a kind of a book a day program for a while, and I just enjoying the fact that I can do that now. And I have 3 book clubs that I'm active in. I have one with friends, a mystery book club, and then a club for adults who love children's books. And I am involved with in volunteer work with the Minnesota Book Awards, and with the I just finished up at the State Fair with Alphabet Forest, which is an area at the State Fair that is for kids who love words, and it's all about the words and about meeting local children's authors, and it's just a really fun area in the fair. So that was enjoyable. But I guess I can agree with every retiree that I've ever talked to that have said, how did we ever have time to work? So time just goes flying by.
Well, you know, from my experience, I too am retired, as you know, and in fact, you talk about having, with your father and then later in life, traveled extensively by road. My son, who is not on camera, but he's here in the room today, and I are on a 3-week odyssey. Before he gets married, well, I'm single again, and I wanted to do this for many, many years, and my late wife said she would be inclined, but I don't think she was up for day after day in the car, even looking at some interesting scenery.
Yes, I know that my dad, he liked to the actual driving part. So I mean, we would have 800-mile days or 500-mile days, and our pictures were all of the road,
Yeah.
mountains and such. But when my dad was alive and he would go through those pictures, he knew exactly where he was.
Mm-hmm.
Too bad we didn't write that down, because when he passed away and we went through it, we threw a lot of road pictures out. But
I'm sure.
But the memories are really wonderful. Going through the blue highways, and stopping at the roadways and the side attractions is just fun.
Well, Robert and I have had a couple of rather long days. Yesterday, for example, we had been in Keystone, South Dakota, viewing the ceremony, the lighting ceremony the night before
Yes.
we got there at Mount Rushmore. And we drove to the western part of this state. We're in Minneapolis today, but we spent the night in Moorhead, Minnesota, on the very west part of the state, which is where my mother grew up. And we were looking for where the old houses were that they lived in when she was a kid, that sort of thing. And so Robert and I do pause. We spent 4 days actually in Yellowstone Park, which is, worth several days, I think, and we enjoyed that. So it sounds like you had an interesting time growing up, and even more recently now that you can again travel more extensively. It sounds like you're enjoying that.
Very much.
Good. Why don't we turn to your education and background? You have 3 degrees, as I recall.
That's
And Could you
correct.
tell us about those and where you earned them?
Well, I got my undergraduate degree from Hamlin University, which is a small liberal arts college in St. Paul. I knew I was going to be a librarian from 2nd grade. And so before I went to Hamlin, I visited the University of Minnesota Library School and asked people there what would be the best major for librarianship. And luckily for me personally, the answer was, any degree would do. So I really had fun with my four-year undergraduate because I took whatever I was interested in. And I wound up with a double major in math and religion, which is kind of a weird double major, but that's how it turned out.
It does sound a little unusual.
But it was fun, and I had a lot of fun. And then I went immediately it turned out that I went into the University of Minnesota Library School, which unfortunately is no longer running, but I really wanted to go somewhere else. I had toured various library schools, and I had picked out a couple, but I wanted to go out of state since I had been in state for my undergraduate. But the university offered a great fellowship, full fellowship, and so economically it was just the right choice. And then I waited a while to get my law degree. And then at the time that I got my law degree, again, it was economically best for me to go to William Mitchell College of Law, again in St. Paul, Minnesota, which offered a night program so that I could work full-time during the day and get my degree in 4 years at night.
Many of our colleagues have done much the same thing. And, as you say, when you are working, you're sort of located and you look around for the appropriate law school, which is hopefully nearby.
Right.
It sounds in your case like it was, William Mitchell. Now, you began actually with a library degree, not the law degree. That came later, you said. You started as an acquisitions librarian at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln.
No,
or in Omaha, I'm sorry, yeah. Later, you were a reference librarian there, all right? Then you moved on to law librarianship as head of public services here at the Hennepin County Law Library in this area. Could you share with us a little bit about how you were attracted from, should we say, the other type of librarianship to our type, law librarianship?
Well, actually, I wanted to be a law librarian since high school. I mentioned that I decided on librarianship in 2nd grade, and that was because that was the time people started asking me what I wanted to do when I grew up. And they said, well, you should be a teacher, because I was smart in school anyways. Or they said, you should be a nurse, because I was a kind person. And I knew I didn't want to do either of those professions, and librarians were the only other profession that I myself personally could see had women in it, that women in it. So I was always interested, even before I was asked. I was in my own little small collection of books. I was carding and pocketing them, and I cataloged and classified them and loaned them out to my friends. So I was doing kind of library work that way from the very beginning. And in elementary school, I was a library assistant. They didn't have enough money to have a full-time elementary librarian. So the librarian taught students to to do the basic work so that she could, you know, go away and have things neat when she came back and stuff. And then I got the library badge in Girl Scouts. So in ninth grade, you have a course where you study the career that you think you're interested in and write a report on it and, you know, learn a lot about it. And so librarianship, that was when I started really closely studying librarianship, and I wrote to all the various associations, and the American Association of Law Libraries sent me a brochure that really caught my eye, and I thought, I don't want to be just any librarian, I want to be a law librarian. But when I graduated, I couldn't get a position in a law library. I couldn't get a position here in Minnesota. I was willing to travel, so my first position turned out to be at the University of Nebraska at Omaha, which we call UNO. So that was why I became a librarian. So I'd say the AAL brochure worked for me.
So that brochure actually was the carrot that brought you into our niche of the profession. Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Or as I've sometimes alluded to, especially with some of our regular colleagues in other types of libraries, we're in the dark side in some ways to them, I guess.
Right.
They don't know what we're up to.
And, you know, and then since I was kind of focused on that, you know, I was interested in learning more about it, and I met with as many colleagues, or as many law librarians as I could, and getting their take on their, and they all were happy. So I knew it would be something I would enjoy.
Well, apparently our predecessors in the field, I hope ourselves as well and our successors as well, we're very open to those of us who had questions from time to time about, you know, thinking of becoming a law librarian. We go in to meet them and talk to them, and very, very friendly and very forthcoming. And that was a characteristic that I know I experienced, and sounds like you did as well.
Right.
And not just with one, but you say you talked to several.
Oh, yes. Many, and in Nebraska I had the opportunity to meet and talk to Creighton Law Library and, you know, the law library at Lincoln, University of Nebraska. So yeah, and firm librarians, and it was I love the idea of learning the bibliography of law, and then never tiring of it, because law pervades every topic and subject, and so it's a good field.
Why don't we move along into your actual career? You held a number of positions. I've already mentioned a couple of your very early ones, and in the introduction, you were the state law librarian. But before that, we've held other positions in the state law library here. Could you talk a little bit about some of those and perhaps some of what you accomplished in them?
Well, it turned out that UNO, University of Nebraska at Omaha, was really a perfect place for me to learn about law. Because even though I was interested in law librarianship, of course I didn't have any experience in it. So when I started on acquisitions, although UNO does not have the law school is at the main university in Lincoln, every department had a course that had the legal aspects of that subject. And also there was a business law program there. So they didn't have a very good law collection at the university, so I was able, as the acquisitions library, that was my responsibility to build it up. So I learned about building a law library collection, with other responsibilities, of course, but for me personally, that was the most important thing. And then when the director decided to move in a different direction with the acquisitions department and kind of disbanded it, I went into the reference department as the legal expert. I had already then established that I knew that collection so well, and I was the kind of go-to person for it. So I wasn't let go like some of the other librarians. And I went into the reference department, and there I got the opportunity to teach the resources, and one of the most accomplishments I'm most proud of is that, along with a law professor out of the business school, a business law professor, we established a legal research course for paralegals. It was the first one that they had made available, and putting that together and teaching that, as you know, teaching is where you really learn.
Mhm.
So I really got a good, deep background into legal research. So that's what I did at UNO. From my point of view, it's best for my career, but it's kind of funny. Sometimes the things you do, you don't think are going to have any impact, and they turned out to be, something that lasts. And what I found out, the thing that lasted apparently at UNO for me was that one of the things I did was set up vertical files. They hadn't had any vertical files. And I was in charge of business as well as law, and I decided it would be good for the students to have a file of annual reports from the various businesses, so that when they were going out and interviewing or when they were interested in a company, they could see what the company wrote about themselves.
Mhm.
So I set up those vertical files, and I had an index on the top that was handwritten. 20 years later, when I went back, and they had built this beautiful new library there, new filing cabinets, I come to discover that they had carefully peeled off my index from the top of the old cabinet and put it on the new one. I was so surprised to see my own handwriting there. And I thought of all the things they could have saved. That was the funniest.
You must have considered it rather useful.
I guess, but it was, it was just a kind of a little thing that I had done.
Mhm.
So then I still wanted to be a law librarian, and the librarians that I'd spoken to were all academic law librarians in Nebraska. They said, you should go to law school. And so I thought, I had been sending out resumes, and I've been sending, cold calls, and, and just, and any job that did open up, I was trying to apply for, and I wasn't getting any bites. So I thought, maybe they're right, I better get a law degree. So I decided to take the LSAT, and I went and started to apply to schools. I decided to apply to schools back here because I figured it would save me money to live with my folks.
Mhm.
And fortunately, Ann Grant became the director of the Hennepin County Law Library, and she found my resume in the file and called me up. So at the same time that I got accepted at the school, I got a call from her and got offered the job for public services, head of public services in Hennepin County. And I guess my thing I'm most proudest of accomplishing there is working to better serve the non-attorney. Because we did, as a public law library, we got a fair number of people coming in, even back in this would be the 70s, yes, the 70s. I noticed that I wanted to have a little bit of help about how I could actually help somebody with a question that wasn't an attorney without malpractice issues or whatever, that might happen.
We did have to keep that in mind when we were doing reference to the pro ses.
So I decided to get together all the reference librarians, and from all the schools, the academics as well as the public law libraries, as firm librarians that might be interested, or and even some public librarians. And we got together and we started kind of hashing out, what kind of reference services can we provide. And that was very interesting because there was a great disagreement, how far we can go, especially with telephone reference. I remember that was one of our biggest arguments. And then we decided to turn our informal group into a formal committee of the Minnesota Association of Law Libraries called the Public Service Liaison Committee, and so that we could, we finally came up with a document, Guidelines of Public Legal Reference Service, that would have the stamp of organizational approval. And that we still have maintained that document. It's available for training of new librarians and things. So I'm very proud of that, and continuing to target services to non-lawyers by connecting with public librarians, and because they of course see more the general public, and often they go there first before they're trying to venture into a law library.
certainly. Yeah, the library is the one they know is likely the local public library.
That's right, and the librarians were afraid of legal reference service for the most part.
Uh-huh.
So I would get together with them and teach them the tools they already had, because they did have resources. They generally had the statutes. I mean, they had the basic resources, and I would say, well, here's what you can answer with what you already have, and here's how far you should, go, and here's when you should refer to us, and we're a public law library, so we will respond to those questions. So that was very good, and I was proud of that work. So I was very happy. I was going to stay at Hennepin County Law Library for my whole career. And then Marvin Anderson, who was the state law librarian in 1983, he kind of wined and dined me. He went across the river, came from St. Paul to Minneapolis, and took me out to lunch and said, you really should have this position as the county law library coordinator for me. And he convinced me, and I decided to move over to the state law library. So in 1983, my first job was the county law library coordinator, which was a wonderful job because, again, I got to travel all over Minnesota, which I done a little bit when I was a kid, but this time I got to see every county because there's a county law library in every county, 87 counties in Minnesota, and saw the beautiful courthouses and again the blue highways with the side attractions that I could stop
Back
at.
on the road, huh?
Back on the road.
Yeah.
And I think I'm proud of being able to establish a manual for Minnesota County Law Librarians and to help them plan their space, space that they had, spaces that they moved into, to try to get professional help for them, and if not professional help, at least to the people that were in charge of managing the library to be able to know what they were doing, even though they were not library trained or trained in librarianship. And a couple of years after the county law library program, after I was doing the county law library program, one of the colleagues on the staff, Beth Peterson, she stumbled across another issue that, like in dealing with non-lawyers, she discovered that the prisoners in Minnesota were writing the same letters to every law library and calling every law library the same questions and getting a wide range of responses. And so she decided to again gather together the people that were concerned and the Department of Corrections and establish a law library service to prisoners program. We agreed as a state law library to have everybody funnel all the questions to us, and then she set up a circuit writing program and went to all the prisons and set up a procedure for handling the questions and wrote a report and convinced the Department of Corrections to fund the program, which I think we might be still the only program in the state that is funded entirely by the Department of Corrections. And so after she did that, then she moved out of it again, wiped her hands of it, and I took over and became head of outreach, which included the county law library program and the prisoner program, and we were able to hire a librarian and a staff person, and I'm very proud that we could continue that program on an annual contract year after year after year, and it's still going strong. So that's an audience that most people like to forget about, but we embrace those populations. And then I would have been happy to continue as the head of outreach for the rest of my career, but the internet blew up, that happened and
Came along,
and when I started at the state law library, we had no PCs, and then everybody had one, and then Westlaw and Lexis were in their infancy. There's very little. There wasn't any internet that was used on a daily basis by people. But as soon as the worth of the internet became known, then we figured we really needed an electronic services librarian. Well, of course, like many state law libraries, public libraries, they're not it was hard to get permission to actually hire somebody to do to do that job. So we finally wound up giving it to me because I had the most personal experience with computers. But so I took over as the electronic services librarian, and I guess I'm most proud of setting up the website. Of course, I had a lot of help. I couldn't do that all by myself, but getting the website set up, we got our website first before the court, and we eventually merged with the court. We got the permission to archive the opinions. The court didn't want to do that. They were just going to put the current opinions up and then let them go. But we knew that it was going to be important to have the archived opinions free to everybody on the internet. And I was happy to make the briefs available online. Mm-hmm. Happy to convince the staff to do email reference, which is a big hurdle in some respects, but it's been a boon for the library. So I think those are my most. Oh, and then the other thing that I accomplished during that time was to actually move the library into an integrated online catalog. Okay. And that was because we worked with other libraries in the state, and we got the funding through the state, through the legislature for a statewide system. So that was important.
Now you've been describing things that I suppose our current colleagues would just assume were around forever.
Right.
But they weren't, and they were pricey to acquire. And
right.
We had
to do it on a limited budget.
And we had to be pretty persuasive to the funding sources to give us whatever that limited budget was.
That's right. And I remember I was the chair of the Capital Area Library Consortium, which is all the librarians within the state government. And at the time that we were trying to go for funding, I remember testifying before the legislature many times, trying to let them understand what this would mean for the public to be able to see their resources online, to get rid of those old catalogs, which I don't know anybody knows exists
even remembers those, other than people in our village.
Yeah. So again, I was happy to continue to do that for the rest of my career, but then Marvin decided he was going to retire. And
such a terrible blow.
A terrible blow, because we worked well together. We had complementary personalities. He was a really good idea man, and I was a good person to bring it to fruition, and although I did have some ideas on my own, but I mean, he had the big ideas. And I thought to myself, no, I really don't. He wanted me to take the job after him. And I thought I didn't really want that responsibility. I figured I was going to retire a few years later. And so I said, no, let's look for somebody that has his skills, because I wanted to look for somebody, again, that was complimentary. But I didn't find anybody like Marvin. He's kind of unique. And as I interviewed the people that applied, they just didn't even have my skills most of the time. And so I figured, well, okay, I'm going to put my hat in the ring. And so we did a second round of interviews, and I was lucky enough to be hired by the Supreme Court and become the state law librarian in 2002. Mm-hmm. So then I discovered that I actually liked it. I discovered that being able to decide, even though we had a limited budget, being able to decide where that money went was kind of nice. Mm-hmm. And being able to move around the people resources and figure out where we're going to spend the money and keep the staff, happy and productive. Turned out to be management was kind of good, and so I appreciated that, learning that about myself, that I could do the management job. There were three things that happened during my tenure that smaller things though, that I also really was proud of. A couple of them have connections to AELO. Mm-hmm. One was one of the things that I had done ever since Hennepin County was to do an SDI service. I scanned all the journals and let people know if there were articles that might interest them in their field. And I continued to do that for the court at the State Law Library. And as I was scanning articles one time, I came across an article in an Alabama journal, and it was about disappearing URLs in Supreme Court opinions. They were focusing on U.S. Supreme Court opinions, but this professor had made a study and found out that the citations in the opinions were disappearing from the web. So that when you went into the opinion and you clicked on it, you didn't see what the judges had seen, or maybe they weren't there at all, you know. And that intrigued me, and I went, because we were archiving the opinions, I went in and did my own study in our opinions, and sure enough, we were disappearing at the same rate. So I said to myself, we got to figure out how to fix this, because attorneys want to know what's being cited, and traditionally, it was usually other court opinions or such stuff that was readily available, but when you get to the internet, you can't guarantee it's going to be there. So I thought one of the ways that we could do that was to present a program at the American Association of Law Libraries conference about disappearing URLs, you know, called it the Great Disappearing Act. And I invited the author of the article that caught my eye. I invited a judge who did cite to the internet, and asked him what he thought about, you know, necessity of keeping that information. And then I told my new electronic services librarian that, you know, I had just hired to replace myself. You're going to do this program, and you're going to research this problem, and we're going to decide together how we can solve it, and, you know, and learn, you know. So we called the U.S. Supreme Court to see what they were doing. You know, we called other places. You know, not a lot of people had started to address this issue. We finally decided on doing turning the website into a PDF, turning the page into a PDF, and archiving that with the opinions, so that when they linked to it, they linked to that PDF, which showed them what the court was looking at the time they did the opinion. But, you know, there were other things that other people had done, but that's what we decided on doing. And then we presented the program, and got a lot of good feedback. That was a lot of fun. The other thing that the American Association, that I involved myself in with the American Association of Law Libraries, was to write the Minnesota report for the state-by-state report on authentication of online legal resources. And that turned out to be very satisfying, because, as it turned out, we were the only state that was actually doing something about that, and not because of us, the state law library, but because of the reviser of statutes. Our reviser of statutes had been looking into that issue. And so when they held a symposium to talk about that, you know, authenticating the online resources, we invited the reviser to come to that symposium, along with myself and one of the Supreme Court justices. And the association wanted to do something about it, and she decided she wanted to do something about it. She was one of the commissioners for the Uniform State Laws. She was able to introduce a model act, which now has wound its way, and actually just this year has passed the process, so that there is something in, you know, a model act available for people, for guidelines on authentication. So I'm having played a small role in that in that process. And the last thing that I'm really proud of during my tenure was the opportunity to work with the history of the State Law Library and the court. The State Law Library was created at the same time that the territory was created. The same first law that was passed mentioned the State Law Library. And similarly, the first act that created the State Law Library, was created along with the state. So our history complements the state's, and during my tenure at the library, we celebrated the sesquicentennial for the territory and the sesquicentennial for the state, and the law library was involved with programming and material for that, which was a lot of fun. And also I chaired the committee that worked on the 100 years of the juvenile court, which is an area I hadn't had a chance to study as well before, but really, really enjoyed looking into and providing programs and information on. So So those were my accomplishments through the years, and so luckily I only did 3 libraries.
I don't know about that, they were lucky, that's for sure. Marvin is apparently a very good judge of talent. He chose you twice, one to come to the library and then eventually to lead it.
Yes.
He gets to rebut you though. Because,
Yes, he does.
Our viewers, some of them realize that I travel around on these trips interviewing people, and I'm in Minnesota at the moment. And you're in Minnesota, so is Marvin.
Right.
I'm going to chat with him tomorrow. And,
I know it will be a good rebuttal.
yeah, well, I don't know about rebuttal, but it'll be good. It'll be a good conversation,
Yeah.
and like yours, will add nicely, I think, to the oral history that this is all going to be part of. Yeah. Now, you have had some recognitions for your various and sundry activities, which are considerable and rather important. Probably about the middle of your career, I would guess, you were given the Minnesota Law Library Association's Law Librarian Award. And then much more recently, the state court and local SIS, state court, county law librarians, SIS, Special Interest Section of the American Association of Law Libraries. They gave you the Bethany J. Okel Distinguished Service Award to the profession. And that's a major acknowledgement, in my opinion, of the work that you have done as being of tremendous importance, and a great deal of effort would go into it, because that award, that's the criteria for it. Could you talk a little bit about why it was you both thought that being involved in the profession more generally than just in your own local employment situation, and perhaps why law librarians generally, this is something that you would encourage, I assume, and others, and why that's important too.
Yes. I don't think that you can be a good professional law librarian and really serve your constituency without listening to and coordinating and cooperating and serving and giving service to your wider organizations, both locally and nationally. I mean, to me, that is where you get your inspiration, your enthusiasm back, and rejuvenation of your goals, and the new ideas that you need to spread spread the services that you have to the various constituencies that will keep your library alive. Because I joined, I was lucky that Anne Grand provided me the opportunity to go to the National Library Association conferences, and my first conference was the conference that set up the special interest sections. Mm-hmm. So I grew my whole entire career. I was part of this, state court and county law library special interest section, and they were the best colleagues I could have, mm-hmm. because that was, where I spent my time. And not to say that I didn't learn from other fields, but they knew what I was doing, and I knew what they were doing, and so that our language is the same. Mm-hmm. And the more we shared ideas, the more we got ideas. And some things you can't do alone in one single library. You have to cooperate. Like I said, we cooperate with other types of library in Minnesota to get a catalog. Mm-hmm. To get funding. So it's essential. You start locally because that's the easiest route, and then if you can go nationally, it's just fun. Mm-hmm. It's fun to travel to the cities. It's fun to get out of your own mind and to enjoy the association in that way, and to do things like I also mentioned, the authentication piece. Mm-hmm. That's something we could not have done as one library or even one state. It had to be a joint project. So there's so much that you can learn and help with colleagues. And if you get, you need to give. And so naturally I did. I think I was very honored to get the Bethany J. Ogle Award. It is an award that's geared to somebody that is at retirement and does recognize that they've provided services, and I just, it was a very wonderful cap.
Well, there are a few of those types of awards, probably very appropriately few of them, but that is one of the most significant that our profession offers. And I'm very pleased to be able to talk to you today, someone who has actually achieved that distinction through a lot of hard work.
And I have to say that both my bosses got the award too, so I learned from the best. Sam Grand and
certainly did. They were both legendary in the field.
Yes, right.
Yeah, Marvin we'll talk to tomorrow, and I think people will find from the conversation some of the things he's done as well. Be very interesting to learn about, just as today's learning about some of your activities.
Yeah, you'll learn some you'll hear some overlap, but yes.
Well, I would expect that since you worked together for a while. You want to think forward a bit. I mean, you and I are both retired. In a sense, it's a new generation running our libraries these days and moving them forward. And but you know, perhaps you have some thoughts about where the state libraries, the county libraries, some of the libraries that serve directly the pro se clients as well as the bar, where they may be headed. I mean, we've seen a tremendous change in the way access to legal information can now be provided, and yet the impact on libraries is continuing with that. Do you have any thoughts where it might be headed in, say, the next few years?
Well, I never considered myself a good I can't even say the word. So
predictor of the future.
Predictor of the future, right? I think that we know that libraries will always experience change. I mean, life is change. You know, there's always changes. And that's what we have to just be prepared for, and to do environmental scans, and to pick up on the cues, and to utilize the tools that become available and incorporate them in our work. And I would say that the pro se field, or the area serving the pro se, has become a very, very important part of law libraries, and that will not go away, because there will always be that need to serve the people who cannot afford an attorney. And it's important for the courts that this is done in a responsible way. And in Minnesota, we have worked on pro se implementation. We've provided computers to help teach, or for people to do forms and various things, and to work through the process. We provide free clinics and things like that. And the library has to be involved in that, because the libraries need to be vital in this area. And usually that's where people go to get the help, pro se help. So yes, I definitely think that that's a field. One of the unfortunate trends that I saw towards the end of my career was that the physical use of the library went down. And we found that more often our services outreach were going, electronically, or. But as the state, we had this beautiful space, we had this beautiful collection that was being a little underutilized, and we had to make sure that the funding bodies knew that even if it wasn't filled with people, it was still used. The resources were still used to serve people by the staff. I may be in the minority on this, but I do think that the should be one law library, and I hope it's the state law library, that is the library of last resort for a print collection. That's whatever is available, because print still is the medium. there still is not, there are still print resources that are not available online. And it is a resource that we bought and own. It isn't one that we're leasing or buying. We don't know what's going to happen with the internet. We don't know what Lexis and Westlaw will decide to do. So I'm probably a lone voice in the wilderness for this, but I do think there has to be a collection, the print collection maintained. Because I think we're going to, for business continuity purposes, I think you never know that you need to have that.
You're not the only one who thinks that way, and I'm not claiming this myself, but some weeks ago, Jerry DuPont, who, as you will recall, was the person who began the Law Library Microform Consortium. And they're still producing, often through digital means now, not microfilms,
But I
copies of our
still think books
material.
preempt microfiche, but.
What they are doing is when they take the book and then they scan it in or put it in to the electronic database, they then send it to permanent storage so that they're keeping the actual paper originals just in case there is a need. He said that, the technology could change to the point that perhaps we will need access to those, even though these are exact copies of them.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
I still think there has to be a resource more local. So I think, but that's good to know,
Well, you're thinking in terms of an accessible resource,
Right.
whereas he's thinking in terms of a true archive of last resort.
Right.
They're literally, he said, putting them in old salt mines, where, the storage is very inexpensive, so it's something that can be maintained from that perspective.
And of course, the university has an archive built into the hill. And we've got some resources there, but not as complete as.
And
That's
I
what
think
I-
this idea of preserving the past in its form has well been identified by many people, including yourself.
Yes, but whether it continues to be that way, I don't know, because it becomes expensive.
Well, that's
So
true.
you have to determine who would bear the responsibility for that.
Yeah.
So as I said, I noticed that, fewer people were coming in to use it. We had to draw people in for special occasions and stuff like that. But the idea is to spread your constituencies as wide as possible so that you have your base and that you're not, that it's not just the court, but the legislature and the other agencies and the public librarians and the historians and genealogists. So, everybody that might, have a need to make your library as viable as possible for the future.
It's an exciting time and yet a scary time, I think. I suppose we could think back to what it may have been like for some of the monks in about the 14th century when suddenly printing from movable type came along, and
Yes.
the upshot would be that, we won't be drawing all our colleagues from around Europe to come read these books anymore. They can have them themselves in a new format. But that new format did empower the world to create modern university education and diversify it by putting it universities in many places instead of everyone having to come. Knowledge sort of could come somewhat to them. And in a way, maybe the internet and digitalization is only expanding that power, that availability. So there's an upside and a downside.
We still need the organizational skills that librarians learn to help people, make something of all this information that's coming at them.
That's right. It could be very overwhelming. There's so much. And, I've heard others comment on the fact that our job in large part is to focus and the ability to learn how to use and access this stuff.
And the ability to know when you've gone as far as you need to go.
Exactly.
Right.
And that's always been tricky, but it must be a lot trickier now than with all this huge array of stuff available.
Yes, I think there's always a job for a librarian, whether they call it librarian or not.
Yeah. Barbara, we're nearing the end of this conversation. It's sort of customary to ask the person with whom I'm talking if there's anything that you would like to add that we haven't talked about.
Well, as I was thinking about doing this interview, it occurred to me that I'm like a lot of people that go into the library field. One of the reasons I went into it is I thought, as an introvert, that that would be a good profession for me because I could just enjoy being in a library and sitting around and reading books, and that would be it.
Hiding the stacks, huh?
Hiding the stacks. And of course, it's the opposite, of course. Especially if you're going to be a good librarian, you have to be able to communicate with all variety of people and talk one-on-one and talk in groups and talk in front of large audiences and to sell yourself and your library. And so I had to work hard through my career to change my, being shy and retiring to being able to get up in front of an audience and even improvise, or I had to work hard to learn how to improvise. But and I think that of all the awards that I received, probably one of the most unexpected, and the one I kind of appreciated the most was the 2008 award that I received from Minnesota Lawyer as an unsung legal hero.
Mm.
Now, Minnesota Lawyer is a weekly newspaper that every lawyer and every judge reads. And it's good to be able to have a library presence in that newspaper. And they decided to start this Unsung Legal Hero Award. They had been routinely printing lists of, best lawyers and, best judges, but they hadn't done the other people that support the judges and the lawyers, like the legal secretaries and the paralegals and the legal administrators. And they included librarians in there. And so we go to this ceremony where they're honoring all these people, and librarians are good. Now, I myself didn't care whether I got it or not, but it was able I got it because I was recommended by a judge and the head of the Children's Law Center. Mm-hmm. And the fact that my work came to their attention and that they nominated me and that I was able to get up in front of this room full of lawyers and they would say, oh, librarians, yes, of course, they're important too. But there's another connection with AALL here, because I realized that this probably happened. The reason that they included librarians is because we took advantage of the VIP program that AAL started. I don't know if it's still in existence, but at one point they were providing free entrance fees to the convention, to the conference. They were having people invite important people that were not librarians to attend the conference. And you know that anytime somebody that's not a law librarian goes to an American Association of Law Librarian conference, they are blown away by the content, by the exhibit hall. Oh, but they love exhibit hall, by the social events that occur there. And in Minnesota, we decided we would send the editor of the Minnesota Lawyer. And he was blown away. And ever since then, we have gotten articles and recognition from the Minnesota Lawyer. So I would say AALL did a good thing with that program.
Again, a program that pays for itself in terms of the impact that we were able to have as a profession.
That's correct.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you again, Barbara Golden, on behalf of myself and on behalf of Michelle Wu, Frank Hodek, and Dick Spinelli, with whom I have the opportunity and privilege of working to develop these these oral histories for the collective oral history of law librarianship, which will be part of Spinelli's Law Library Reference Shelf in Hein Online. Again, thank you for being part of it today.
I'm very happy to be involved. Law librarianship is a wonderful career. Thank you.